I don't have all the answers right now, but there was one day, and I remember this specific grey meeting room that I was sitting in, and I was looking outside at the bright day outside, and I was in this very clinical, sterile meeting room, and I just thought, I don't have the answers, but I've now made the decision that I'm going to acquire the answers.
Firstly, Lewis, let's kick things off with the fundamentals. What would you say is the first thing that people need to do when they start a dropshipping business?
So in order to get to the point where you're even ready to start a business, the foundations, in my opinion, would be having the right mindset, because there's quite a big shift from being in the employment world where you're an employee and you're given a salary and you're given a set of responsibilities. Transitioning over to being a business owner is a very different mindset, and it will take some adjustment and some adaptation in how you go about that. So a few of the things that come to mind when talking about this mindset shift would be building up resilience, making sure that you reframe problems and obstacles that you will face as just minor setbacks, things that you have to overcome, challenges that you can strive to try to get past. Because if you're in an employee mindset, you might still be in the frame of mind that a challenge is a frustration and something that you'd want to escalate to a senior manager or say, oh, it's not part of my job, I don't do that. But you have to, and we talked about this in other episodes, this concept of extreme ownership. You have to embrace those challenges. You have to embrace the rocky road ahead if you're going down the entrepreneurship path. So having that growth mindset and constantly being open to learning, evolving, and seeing those new challenges as growth opportunities is a great hack. If you can reframe the problems that lay ahead as just mini challenges along your journey to success as an entrepreneur, it will set you up so well for future success, because you will never run out of challenges. You'll always encounter these along your path. And so you have to become okay with figuring them out as you go. One of the other things that we often do as entrepreneurs is get quite distracted by things. So there are always shiny new tools and tactics and people talking about different business models and stuff. And it does become quite difficult to really focus on one thing, especially in this day of social media and distractions on the internet, all the recommendation algorithms on YouTube and Netflix and all of these platforms trying to steal your attention. Sometimes you just need to shut out the noise and say, what are the things that I need to do to achieve the goal that I'm trying to achieve? And it sounds simple, but it is a fine art in this day and age. People are not very good at doing it. And so to set yourself apart as an entrepreneur, you have to find that balance between input and output. I made the mistake myself early on in my entrepreneurial journey where I got overwhelmed, not overwhelmed even, I just got bombarded with inspiration. I used to go to entrepreneur meetups and listen to podcasts, and I used to, because all of that stuff made me feel good. It gave me a dopamine hit of thinking, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm taking in this content, I'm inspired, I'm pumped, I'm ready to go. And so many people do that, but there's a fine balance between entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, and then actual entrepreneurs who create profitable, thriving, successful businesses that change the world. And so if you can make sure that you're not just surrounding yourself with inputs and taking stuff in because it feels good, but instead say, what are the things I need to do today? Shut down distractions, turn off all the devices that are not essential, close all the tabs that you don't need, and just get to it and figure out, what do you need to do? What are the actions that you need to take to get you to the point of output? So when I started, I treated it very much like a job. I said I wanted to set a deadline for when my wife Becky and I were going to quit our jobs and move to Southeast Asia, to move to Chiang Mai, to start living the location independent digital nomad lifestyle. But in order to get to that point, I knew that the business had to be up and running and have at least replaced both of our salaries, right? So I had a clear deadline. I put in long hours, but I relished that pressure. That lit a fire under me, because I thought, well, this is like, I treated it like my one shot at a better life. It was almost like it's now or never. If I don't make this work, it's going to be very difficult for me later on to transition, because the golden handcuffs of employment and all that, the cushy lifestyle that you're in, just get tighter and tighter as your responsibilities increase. So that's the way I went about it. And I think that is a big shift for a lot of people. So those are the foundations that you need to do before we even jump into any of the tactical stuff. Is just making sure that you have that drive of an entrepreneur, that willingness to overcome challenges, and also making sure that you treat it like a job and make sure you set clear expectations and deadlines on yourself to get the task up and running and completed.
Wow, it's so clear from listening back to your story that you said it so clear in your mind that it had to work. And by putting yourself in that mindset from the very start, it's clear looking back at your story that had a huge impact on the way that you made your business work and went on to get to the position you're in now, because you set your mindset from the start. So I think it's absolutely fascinating that you chose that as your first single action to do when starting a business. I didn't know you'd pick that, but the fact that you put mindset as the number one thing, and some people think it's like fluff. We're talking about mindset again, even though we're talking about actionable steps to start a business. But quite simply, it must be the foundations, and you must think that as well. For all of the actions you take, all come from the position where your mindset is in. So it's fascinating that you've chosen that. So on that point then, I guess, why do you think it's so important? Why have you chosen it as the first thing really to think about when launching a new business?
Well, it's just the thing that underpins everything else. If you have the right mindset, and I think the way that I used to think about it was that the penny drop moment that I had was, I don't have all the answers right now, but there was one day, and I remember this specific grey meeting room that I was sitting in, and I was looking outside at the bright day outside, and I was in this very clinical, sterile meeting room, and I just thought, I don't have the answers, but I've now made the decision that I'm going to acquire the answers. And it's a really difficult one to encapsulate verbally, because you almost have to experience it. But hopefully what we're doing with this podcast is providing you with enough ammunition so that one day, one of you, at least if we can do this for one person, then it's been worth doing all of these episodes, is that you have that same moment where you think, oh, I'm doing this. Get out my way. I'm figuring these challenges out. And whilst I may not have the answers now, I'm now on a path to figuring them out. And I'm going to get around a community of other people who've already done them so I can learn from their experiences. So it's just making sure that you go into business with that positive mindset, because if you come into this with an air of expectation, or, hey, I want everything to go smoothly, or do it for me, or I want to blame someone if something goes wrong, you're only setting yourself up for failure down the line. So this is why we always say that this is really the foundation and the fundamental aspect of becoming a successful long-term entrepreneur. And that openness and willing to learn is so important. For example, when I first started in e-commerce, I started with the lower ticket, selling cheap products from China model that a lot of people fall into the trap of. And I think the most dangerous thing with that model is that it does work to an extent, because if it just didn't work, people wouldn't get tempted to do it. And then it would just be like, but the trouble is you do make some sales with it. Now, trying to actually make profit when you've got those long 30-day delivery times, very low quality products, often with no quality assurance, no ability to return, lots of chargebacks, refunds, so many problems associated with it, that when I had the open-mindedness to say, well, there might be a better model out there. For example, the model we now use, which is the Home Turf Advantage model, which is where we sell higher ticket items using Google Shopping. When I first went into that model, it felt like a risk, because it wasn't a clearly defined model here in the UK that I knew of people doing. So I had to rely on data, I had to rely on teachings, I had to rely on mentors. And when I made my first 2 sales in one of the first afternoons of running ads, I think it was maybe like a week into running ads or something, very, very early on, I was in bed ill on that day. And my phone just went ching, and it was like a £900 order. And then another one about half an hour later. That solidified in my mind that the openness to change and innovation was so important as an entrepreneur, because that moment solidified in my mind that had I not made this change into a better model, I would still probably to this day, if I hadn't given up by now, be trying to patch over and fix the old broken model of low ticket dropshipping from China.
Yeah, it's so true. You've got to have that mixture of both perseverance and pushing through difficult times. And you've got to mix that with also the adaptability to change if you're going down the route that you can see clearly isn't going to be successful for you. And it's that struggle that we have as entrepreneurs to go between the two. Persevere, be stubborn in the face of any difficult times, but at the same time adapt if you're going down the wrong model, which it sounds like you were, and I know I was. And it's so true that we have to get our mindset in the right place as a first and foremost step. And when I reflect on starting my own business, I know for a fact that had I not had this in place, I'd still be up at night longing for my own business, and I wouldn't be in the position I am today.